Well, hello and welcome to another recording of Two Geeks and a Marketing Podcast. We are back for more news, tech content and wisdom for the world of marketing. I say we because, of course, I am joined by my co-host, a marketing speaker and consultant, spent his whole career helping his customers keep their marketing simple but effective. He's the author of 𝗧𝗵𝗲 Marketing Plans and the creator of the Rockstar video series. I give you Mr. Roger Edwards.
Oh, and of course, my co-host is a digital marketing veteran. He's a speaker, trainer and advisor with nearly 3 decades of experience, who enjoys revealing visual storytelling techniques to help you build a better online campaign faster. I give you Monsieur Pascal Fintoni.
Thank you very much. Everyone, thank you so much for your support. This is episode 132, Roger Edwards.
132. Now, you know, it's scary, isn't it? We started this podcast when we were all locked down in the COVID pandemic, and that was 2020, and this is 2026, and we're still going.
We're still going. And listen, I hope you don't mind, but I'm going to have a quick interlude into the introduction section because, listen, we're living through rather exciting times because at the time of recording this episode, the crew of Artemis 2 are on their way to the moon. Now, the reason why I'm bringing this up, Roger, is because you and I have always mentioned space exploration, particularly in This Week in History, but I will take you back to September 2022 because we actually reviewed Artemis, the program, and Artemis 1. We actually did a review of the marketing campaign of the Artemis program, September 2022, that would take us back to episode 85.
Wow, I didn't even remember that until just now. I mean, yeah, it's fantastic. I mean, to see a rocket like that launching is great, you know. But that, again, the world that we live in now is so messed up. There are still people posting on X, on Threads, saying that it isn't real and that it's an AI image of this rocket being launched and we never went to the moon in the first place, blah blah blah, the world's flat. For goodness sake, people, wake up. This is fabulous. Live it, enjoy it.
No, absolutely. So by the time this episode goes live, the crew will be back towards Earth. So by the midpoint for you and I, from recording to going live, they'll be the furthest away a man has ever been from the Earth, on the other side of the moon. Yeah, it's just amazing. I mean, we could spend the entire episode. Perhaps we should actually maybe do a special Artemis 2 episode one day, but we must move on with our regular audio and video magazine structure. We have lots of segments to go through, and we always end with film marketing. And it was your turn, Roger, to select the movie for film marketing.
Yeah, this week we are going to be talking about Scent of a Woman, which was a film launched back in 1992, starring Al Pacino, one of my favourite actors, and he got an Oscar for this one. A lot of people said it was a long overdue Oscar, and funnily enough, even though Al Pacino is one of my favourite actors, for some reason we just missed this film. And when we actually saw it on Netflix last week, and let's watch Scent of a Woman. We haven't watched that for ages. And we started watching it and we looked at each other and said, do you know what? I don't think we've ever seen this. So it was completely new on us. So
wow.
The review that we will have today, at least from my point of view, will be an honest to goodness first time viewing of Scent of a Woman.
I can't wait because I went to the cinema to see this and it was a VHS cassette that I had and then probably moved on to DVDs afterwards. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating to get your kind of first-hand, reviews and feelings by the movie. But let's begin then and launch this audio and video magazine with our first segment, In the News.
After a truck carrying over 413,000 Kit Kat bars was stolen, what could have been a PR headache turned into a marketing win for Kit Kat as the internet became filled with jokes and playful banter from fellow brands offering their condolences.
Well, listen to this. Despite early chatter that the trailers gave away too much of the plot, Project Hail Mary has become a huge box office success, grossing over $300 million worldwide, setting records as Amazon MGM's biggest non-franchise launch of the year.
According to digital marketing platform ESB Connect, UK purchasing behaviour is going back to familiar cocooning patterns and shows that while consumers are clicking less frequently, they are buying more than before.
Okay, well, 𝗬𝗀 and Publicis London created porcelain. Listen to this, Roger. The world's first magazine printed on flushable toilet paper, meant to be read in the loo and safely flushed as part of a playful new campaign.
Following its return to Formula One, Ford is experimenting with micro docu-series on Apple TV. The short episodes showcase engineers developing the next-gen engines, offering a behind-the-scenes look at the work leading up to race day.
While Netflix and NBC Universal are exploring phygital marketing. That's the term that describes combining in-person fan experiences like fan conventions or pop-up events with digital engagements to promote shows and films beyond traditional trailers and ads.
Cadbury has launched 4 clever press ads to help families hide Easter eggs. Designed to be cut out and assembled, the ads disguise eggs as everyday objects, from books and tea bags to alarm clocks and peg bags, making egg hunts trickier and more fun.
And finally, McDonald's has teamed up with the animated film K-pop Demon Hunters for themed meals featuring collectible photo cards and QR codes that unlock exclusive content in the app. Well, the brands are having fun right now, it would seem, Roger Edwards, and I think we all need that, don't we?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it, there's some really, really nasty stuff going on in the world. And I think we do need some moments of hilarity and moments of fun to try and take our mind off what is happening.
I think what is also interesting, I'm going to go and pick a few of those news items. They all playing to their strengths. So shall we go back to the one that you read at the start? Because that's made the headline around the world, the Kit Kat bars. You know, it's a bit like the Great Train Robbery of sort, isn't it? I mean, I don't even know whether they've caught the people involved and whether they found the Kit Kat bars again.
No, but when they find them, they're going to probably bang them up for life, aren't they? How dare they steal so many Kit Kats?
And the people saying that, you know, they are all recognizable. I think they're part of the special edition as well. They have serial numbers and so on. So it's possible that they won't be able to do much with them. But this idea of what could have been and started potentially, you could argue, with as a PR disaster, turned into actually something quite joyful with all the other brands joining in over social media and offering their condolences and offering, you know, to essentially switch their products with the Kit Kat bars that we're missing.
Yeah, of course, there'll be some people out there who say the whole thing was a stunt and that the actual truck was meant, you know, was actually stolen by Kit Kat themselves just to generate the publicity.
What do you make of the term phygital? You and I, many episodes ago, were suggesting that Netflix were becoming lazy with their marketing. You know, they have the platform, they announce what's coming soon, but it felt as though that was the extent of their marketing effort. Occasionally, I don't know about you, get a newsletter, which is just really, really poor. Doesn't really get me excited. So this idea of mixing it up now between the online stuff that they do with in-person events, phygital.
Yeah, okay. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? And I sort of have a love-hate relationship with Netflix. They have some good films, they have some good series, but then on the other side of the coin, they have some absolute clangers as well. And I think you're absolutely right. Their actual marketing efforts are pretty poor. You know, once you're on the app, you know, and the algorithm, however it works, it always serves you up things that it thinks you want to watch, series that you might want to see, films that you might want to see. But I can't actually remember the last time I got an actual communication from Netflix or saw an actual advert from Netflix. Maybe they've become so big now that they, you know, they feel that they don't need to communicate with long-standing customers.
No, and so maybe they're learning, maybe they've looked at the data, and maybe the partnership with NBC Universal is helping. Sometimes you have to work with others to get it right. From digital to physical, so we've got 𝗬𝗀 with their magazine printed on flushable toilet paper. And then you've got Cadbury, where you can essentially, in magazine and newspapers, you know, grab a pair of scissors and cut out essentially different types of wrappers to make, you know, the Easter egg hunt harder. That touchy-feely thing is coming back, isn't it?
Yeah, I actually have to say that the 𝗬𝗀 thing is really funny. I mean, it's a standing joke, isn't it, that people tend to read the newspaper when they're sat on the toilet. You know, it's almost too much information, but that's what people do. So yeah, I'm surprised nobody's ever done this before. I mean, it's such a great idea, and you read the stuff and then you flush it down the loo. That's great. Again, the Cadbury thing is fun. It fits with Easter. There's a bit of controversy going around about Cadbury at the moment because of the extremely high price of cocoa beans around the world. I think they've changed the recipe for Cadbury's chocolate. There's a lot more palm oil involved in it. Now, I haven't had any Cadbury's chocolate for probably since last Easter, to be perfectly honest. So I don't know whether that's changed the way it tastes. A lot of people say that it just doesn't taste like Cadbury's chocolate anymore. So maybe they've felt they've had to up the ante a bit in terms of their marketing to maybe paper over the fact that they don't taste the same as they used to.
No, absolutely. And what is interesting for me, though, is back to, with the 𝗓𝗃 stuff, I thought this could be an April's Fool's Day, right? So I did some research, and actually, it's a real thing. You had people actually writing entire articles about the magazine. They were showing you page by page. There was a real thing. There was even a crossword. There was all sorts you could do with it. So, as a PR stunt and playing to their strength, well done. So then from the physical to the digital, we've got McDonald's. So you buy a meal with a kind of partnership with K-pop Demon Hunters. I watched about 10 minutes of that and I couldn't stand it, but I'm not the audience. I am not the demographic for that. And then you would scan, obviously, your mobile phone, the QR code, and be taken to that K-pop Demon Hunters universe through the app, So I think what we're saying is people are mixing it up a bit more on that. So for all, I always recommend people don't use term like phygital, because as we've said, you and I, time and time again, it's taken so long for marketers to have a seat at the boardroom table. The last thing you need to do is come up with, terms like that to make people's eyes roll, raise an eyebrow. I want to close very quickly because I went to see Project Hail Mary last Saturday, and I had a wonderful time. Very different to The Martian, that's for sure. But this idea of, people out there saying, that trailer is giving far too much away. There's no surprises whatsoever, and therefore people will not go and see the film because you've revealed all, and that's not been the case at all.
Now, I have to say, I don't really know much about this film, Project Hail Mary. I mean, it's a bit of a weird title. I've got coming across as a bit grumpy today. I haven't been to the cinema for quite a long time, and it's because I just don't find the experience at the cinema very pleasant anymore, because it's very expensive. The food that you buy, if you have to buy it, is rubbish and overpriced. And people are very, very inconsiderate. They sit there with their mobile phones out, with the screen on brightest bright. People are shoveling popcorn or hot dogs into their mouths with disgusting noises. And I just think, you know what? I'm going to wait for this film to come out on Blu-ray or streaming, and I'm just going to sit and watch it at home on my widescreen TV and avoid having to have this miserable experience at the cinema. Now, I hope that the experience you had at your brand new cinema in Durham was okay. But at the moment, it just feels to me as if I won't be going to the cinema until something really, really exciting, perhaps the next Bond movie or something like that comes out.
No. And listen, I had the same kind of trepidations, because, I've shared, how we've been disappointed and eventually stopped going. But yeah, it was a brand new cinema, not far from Durham. It was also run by a close business friend of mine. So I thought, you know what, let's see whether I could potentially consider returning to the movies. And I have to say it worked out. I don't know whether because it's brand new and sadly people will start to misbehave the next few months or so once when the wheelchair's worn out. But for now, I've been encouraged to go back and treat myself to the occasional essentially experience, because it's becoming a bit of a space theme after our reference to Artemis to a moment ago. But it is wanted to be seen on the big screen, and they did some very, very interesting choices when it came to the soundtrack and the music. So once you get to see the movie, Roger, I couldn't wait to hear your feedback. Indeed, perhaps it should be part of film marketing at some stage.
Absolutely.
Super. Well, listen, thanks very much for taking part in this quick fire look at the news. Fun news. I think the brands are doing their bit to lift everybody's spirits. We're going to slow things down now with our next segment, the content spotlights. So for this segment, you've chosen, I can tell from the show notes, a video, Roger Edwards.
Yes, this is gloriously simple. I suppose it fits into my ethos perfectly about helping people to keep their marketing simple. But there's also a sort of speaking presentation content angle to this as well. Now, I was recently involved with a financial services event, and it was aimed at younger people. And the aim was to try and get younger people more confident on their feet speaking at conferences or events and that sort of thing. And I do find it quite strange, Pascal, that we live in this world now where everybody has, a 4K camera in their phone, and a lot of these youngsters are holding their phones up and doing TikTok videos and doing Threads videos and YouTube shorts and all of that sort of thing, and they come across incredibly confident and insightful. But actually, if you ask them to get up and speak in front of people, all of that confidence seems to shrivel away. And I don't know what it is. It just must be the way that we've brought them up, that they're comfortable with a camera pointing at them, but they're not comfortable with a load of faces pointing at them. And this whole thing was just to try to give people confidence in speaking publicly. And one of the sessions was just giving people random topics. So talk for 5 minutes about Blackpool Pleasure Beach, or talk for 5 minutes about Doctor Who, or talk for 5 minutes about film marketing. You get the idea. And what was so obvious is when you give somebody a random topic like that, their brain just sort of goes into absolute overload and just starts spilling out incoherent nonsense. And people just stand there and, putting aside any confidence issues, they just sort of ramble. And I thought it was quite interesting. And bizarrely, I came across this video as a result of going to that event, trying to see, is there a better way of helping people to get their thoughts more coherent? So this video is called the 3-2-1 speaking trick that forces you to stop rambling, and it's 𝗏𝗏. I hope I've spelt that, I've said that correctly. This guy's a YouTuber. He's obviously a speaking guru, and he's got about 4.5 million subscribers, so he's obviously doing the right thing. And this video is literally only about 5 minutes long, but he goes through this technique where he says, if you use this format, if somebody gives you a random title like Blackpool Pleasure Beach or film marketing, it will give you the way of being able to just turn it into something coherent and actually quite good. And the 3-2-1 technique is as follows. So I don't know why it's called the 3-2-1 technique, because as he presents it, it's more like the 1-2-3 technique, but that's a topic for another day. So he says, when somebody gives you a random topic, the first thing is, number one, is say one thing about that topic. One thing, just one thing. The second thing is 2 types or 2 ways that you can either describe it or build upon the one thing that you started with. And then the third thing is 3 steps that you could take to effectively use that subject or that topic or whatever it is. So I'll pick Blackpool Pleasure Beach, for example, because I sort of came up with that in the top of my head. So the one thing about Blackpool Pleasure Beach, it's a theme park that's been around for over 130 years, and it's on the beach in Blackpool, and it has millions of visitors every year. That's probably more than one thing, but you get what I say. 2 types. It has thrill roller coasters that are very high, like 120 feet high. The Grand National's a wooden roller coaster, That's for thrill seekers, but it also has nice, gentle roundabout type rides or dark rides that go inside, like the Ghost Train, to cater for people who are less thrill seeking or families and that sort of thing. And the 3 steps would be, if you want to go to Blackpool Pleasure Beach, go online, buy the ticket. That's the first step, because it's cheaper to buy it online. Get yourself in the car or on the train and get yourself to Blackpool, either on the train or on the M55. And the third step is make sure you get there early, get through the door at least by 9:30 so that you can get into the queues for the rides. If I'd said, tell me about Blackpool Pleasure Beach without that format, then I would have just started, oh, Blackpool Pleasure Beach is in Lancashire and blah, blah, blah. And my brain just goes into, it's been around for 100 years and it just comes out as a mess. But that little formula that he came up with in that video, and he actually has somebody come up on stage and they quite randomly give her a subject, and she absolutely nails it using that formula. So I think it's a really, really interesting one. It's dead simple and it's really, really easy. And I thought we maybe have a little bit of fun, so I could perhaps come up with a completely random topic and see if you can just do the 3-2-1 format for me. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I can just say, actually, I absolutely love it. I can just see how powerful that is. So, well, I'm a bit anxious, but let me know. What's the topic?
Well, I haven't even thought about this in advance. I thought completely and utterly random. So let's have a think. Let's go for the city of Glasgow. So, Pascal, the one thing about the city of Glasgow, go.
Well, people don't realize, but the city of Glasgow is probably just as popular as Edinburgh, although all the PR talks about Edinburgh. And there's 2 things you can really do with Glasgow. You can immerse yourself in the history, particularly the scientific history and the kind of engineering heritage of Glasgow, or you can go for the kind of modern side with the museums, the parks, and some of the actually very, very modern kind of new living quarters as well that they've got there. And if I had to choose, I would probably use public transport to go to Glasgow to have more freedom to move around, because parking can be a challenge. But if you want to drive there, the park and ride is exceptional. And if you come from further afield, well, I would probably fly, because people don't realize that, but there is an airport in Glasgow, not just Edinburgh.
Wow, you see, it really works, doesn't it?
Well done. That's good.
You haven't thought about Glasgow for 20 years, and all of a sudden you're
Probably.
an absolute expert on the subject. No, isn't that just absolutely glorious? The 3-2-1 technique, or the 1-2-3 technique. Maybe think of it as the 1-2-3, one thing, 2 types, 3 steps. Absolutely fantastic. And think about it. You could use that format not only in a public speaking scenario. You could do it to create a Facebook post or a LinkedIn post. You know, somebody says, write a topic about financial services. One thing, 2 types, 3 steps. You've got a post. You know, you've got a script for a video. You've got the basis of being able to speak about a subject that you didn't think you knew much about. Wow. Pascal, what's your content spotlight then this week?
Before, can I just react to that first before I move on to my content spotlight? Isn't simplicity just delightful?
Yes.
I mean, come on. Well done, Roger. Well done, Vin, you know. But also, can I just say, so I think, I hope I'm not going to, mess this up. and as I was going through the 1-2-3, I felt very comfortable. I felt very relaxed. I was actually exciting, but more importantly, I could visualize what I was saying to you in my head. So I was literally imagining, because I've been to Glasgow a few times to visit my cousin, so that's one advantage, I guess. I hope you don't mind me obviously dissing Edinburgh in the process of doing so. So my selection, very much like you, was inspired by my kind of day-to-day. As a trainer and as a consultant, I've been really quite busy for the last couple of years with regard to artificial intelligence and its ethical, practical contribution to the marketing function. And you and I've said this before, we understand in the early days of AI, to use this acronym, that the temptation was to use AI to create content. So people went away and created word-based content, kind of images, video, and audio, with everything that comes with it. And we already said at the time, there will come a time very soon where you need to mature from that. You need to kind of progress from that. the challenge for you and I is that we do like examples and kind of so we call them case studies to
Yeah.
inspire others to move on from this kind of Gen AI, which is again an awful term. I was reminded, so when you and I, a long time ago, I'm afraid to say, was last century, Roger, when we studied marketing at uni and so on. Do you remember the textbooks and everything that the lecturers were sharing with us came from big brands?
Mm.
So we learned about British Airways marketing campaign. We learned about Virgin Airways coming in as a disruptor. We learned about Coca-Cola. So all those big brands were part of our learning. And in a way, created this false impression that we had to work, all of us, for big brands to be successful marketers. So I've been wondering, would it help me, would it help you, Roger Edwards, to share your words of wisdom if we could share an example from an established brand? And it so happens that in a magazine called Marketing Tech News, Mohammed Zuhulzni wrote an article about Coca-Cola and how they are expanding their use of AI beyond, if you will, creating clever social media posts or creating some adverts and so on. And in fact, just as a little kind of bonus, if you read the full article, we've got the links in the show notes. At the end of the article, there's a link to Nestlé's approach to using AI. So maybe as kind of educators of sort, we need to go back to the old-fashioned way of talking about brands because at least their stories are known to us. So this article is great. It doesn't take long to read that. And this idea of Coca-Cola at the strategy level is moving away, well, they're trying to anyway, from what they call pricing-led growth, or kind of, working on discounts or that kind of things, to what they call persuasion-led growth. And I'm not so sure I'm happy with the term persuasion, but, I can see what they're trying to say here. And they're saying that, at an exec level, they now accept that digital systems and AI can be a contributor to running successful marketing campaigns, but they have to move away from solely the generative AI stuff. So two examples. AI used to actually inform product development. So you may know, we don't get to see a lot of that in the UK, but in the US, Coca-Cola do an enormous amount of limited edition drinks linked to a sporting event, linked to maybe a kind of a singer, sometimes linked to, something. And what they can do now, which they could not do in the past, is use AI to analyze a large volume of consumer discussions and opinions across multiple channels, from handwritten notes during an in-person event all the way to comments on Reddit and social media. And that led to actually them putting together a bit of a competition to get people involved in what they call the Taste of the Future. And there was an early example that others have followed since then, where they created the Coca-Cola year 3000 zero sugar. So it's saying, what would Coca-Cola look like in the year 3000? Please contribute to that. And they did a whole campaign, so analyzing discussions and opinions to inform a new product or a new campaign is the way in which they're going to supplement just creating the adverts themselves. But then you have the other extreme, using AI to do hyper-local marketing activities. So what was explained in the article, Roger, is that Coca-Cola, obviously an international global brand, they do work actually through networks of independent partners. Though you will see the brand Coca-Cola, it may not be Coca-Cola themselves, it could be a partner working through. So you have all those data sets, you have all this kind of customer data floating around this enormous partnership network. And to date, they just couldn't really access it necessarily, or the volume was such they were just impossible for mere mortals to make sense of it completely. So what they can do now is literally analyze that data and create some hyper-local marketing campaigns at a fraction of the cost and at a fraction of the time, and keeping therefore their cost low as well. So it's a great way to be reminded that, it is time now to move on from experimentation. It is now to move on just for the Gen AI stuff. And I'll leave you with that sentence that Mohammed has written in the article. The technology does not replace human creativity or brand strategy. Marketing teams still define the message and the brand identity.
This is really quite interesting, and I feel that at the moment we're sort of finally maybe coming out of the AI hype stage, because up until now, AI was going to replace everybody's jobs. AI was going to rewrite everything. AI was just going to do everything, and we were all going to sit back and sip a nice large beer or a nice glass of wine and let AI get on with it. But you're almost in that stage now where people are admitting that yes, it does have its limitations. You know, we understand that these large language models are still making mistakes. They're not perfect. In fact, you know, I've heard a lot of pushback against ChatGPT recently, that it's got worse, and you know, the LLM is hallucinating more and being inaccurate more, and I think that's prompted people to admit that yes, they can use AI and they can use it quite successfully, but they can't get it to replace the human completely. They can get it to work in conjunction with the human, and maybe that combination of human plus AI is a phenomenal combination, but just using it on its own at the moment is causing issues. You know, I even had an email from one of the publications that I write articles for, and that communication, which surprised me quite a lot, saying that they will effectively terminate your contract if they suspect that you are using AI to create any of the copy that you submit to them as a publication. And I thought, wow, well, you know, I would have thought they'd have been using AI quite a lot, but no, they are taking it very seriously and say, if you want to write for us, it comes out of your head, right from your head onto the screen or onto the page. And I think maybe that's probably quite a good thing, that we've got to that stage now where the hype stage has gone, and we're now starting to learn how to use things properly.
Yeah, and you know, listen, if you think about the origin of artificial intelligence, you know, it was gifted to us from the world of science and technology, and they didn't spend their time creating images and videos. You know, they were analyzing data
Yes.
to make the world a better place. And if you think about health sciences and analyzing thousands of records in with cancer patients, you know, examples galore like this. So it was always my view that, I mean, you know, if I take you back, and I'll use and listeners back to your book, you know, 𝗏𝗏 and Marketing Plans, and that chapter about knowing your audience almost better than they know themselves, I think that's where the contribution of AI comes in, because that insights then should stimulate your imagination as a human being to come up with clever ideas, inventive ways to engage your audience, not enrage, as you say. So I'm excited about the maturation process. I think it's still going to be a long kind of walk, not a sprint. But in terms of your hype, I'm afraid to say we're not out of the woods, Roger Edwards, because this year, following from the AI hype, we're going to have the agentic AI hype, and it's going to be even more kind of tiresome. But you know, we are where we are, and hopefully you and I and many others out there will continue to you know, share our, you know, words of wisdom and trying to keep everybody on track.
Fantastic.
Now, as we say many a time, none of this would be possible without the vision and dedication of pioneers of the distant and recent past. Can we move on, please, to our next segment, This Week in History?
In 1953, the first black and white 3D motion picture, Man in the Dark, opens at the Globe Theatre in New York City. 2 days later, at the Paramount Theatre in NYC, a competitor releases The House of Wax, the first 3D movie in colour.
Ouch. And in 1985, about 2 years after joining Apple, John Sculley pushes Steve Jobs out of his leadership role of the Macintosh division with support from other executives. Although Jobs kept the title of chairman, he lost real power and soon left the company.
In 1990, Twin Peaks, created by David Lynch and starring Kyle MacLachlan, premieres on ABC TV. The show's 2-hour pilot became a major cultural event, drawing over 34 million viewers.
In 1999, the year of the Matrix, the first email virus to cause widespread damage and one of the fastest spreading viruses in history, Melissa, was released into the wild on an early Friday morning, and within 3 days would infect between 100 to 250,000 computers around the world. It targeted Microsoft Word and Outlook, spreading through email attachments, forcing major companies to shut down their email servers. Wow.
Well, I can remember Melissa, because it happened literally just before we were supposed to be fixing the Millennium bug. So the poor IT companies really had a lot to think about.
Yeah, and 1999, we can be guilty of forgetting this is the early days of computers at home and at work. Let's be frank, the early days of obviously the internet. Most companies adopted it in the 1995 era. The chap responsible behind this thought it was a prank. I think the whole thing was very much a apprentice sorcerer moment, but he was caught and spent nearly 3 years in prison.
Yeah, absolutely
Yeah.
right.
Twin Peaks. My goodness. Tell me more,
Oh,
Roger, about Twin Peaks.
well, you know what? It's one of those series, isn't it, that you always remember. I mean, it was very highly stylized, wasn't it, in the way that
Mm,
it was shot. It was very dark, maybe even almost film noir. It had a very distinctive title theme music.
mm.
Obviously, Kyle MacLachlan, very striking actor. But, even 30 odd years on, what I mainly remember about Twin Peaks is that I had absolutely no clue about what on earth was going on throughout the entire series. And, I have watched it again since it was originally shown. Now, it's still probably about 10 years since I watched it the last time. And on the rewatch, I still watched it and thought, you know what? I have no idea what is going on. But it was curiously addictive, possibly for the fact that nobody knew what was going on.
I mean, that's all people talked about in the office. I remember that vividly. I would say the only one that came close to that truly cultural phenomenon was probably the X-Files.
Mm.
That would be parity. But at least with the X-Files, we knew what was going on most of the time. Um, didn't I mean? I don't think that they did a film, didn't they, afterwards?
Yes.
Um, and that had lost its tonality. You mentioned about the unique look and feel and the sound and that incredibly kind of memorable, music at the start. I think the movie was almost like someone had not watched the series and did something,
I think you're right. Yeah. Yes. Oh, we better make a movie, but we won't use any of the things that made the TV series successful to help the movie be successful.
Do you know, I think I'm going to have to buy the box set now because of you. I'm going to have to watch this again.
No, I mean, again, it is one of those, and maybe sometimes, it's good for TV to challenge us, and possibly these days, because we've got so much access to so much content, whether it's Netflix, Amazon, Disney Plus, whatever, we've got so much we can watch, and a lot of it tends to be really quite low bar, doesn't it? I can't remember the last time I watched something of a caliber like Twin Peaks that made me actually sit there and think, wow, I don't really know what's going on here, or wow, that's really raised some issues in my mind that I think I need to go away and do research on. A lot of it is just fairly low bar mediocrity, whereas a series like Twin Peaks had people talking at the photocopier, talking at the coffee machine, and
Mm.
if we were to have it today, they'd be talking about it on social media, and I think maybe some of the TV producers of the current day could have a look at a series like Twin Peaks and think, come on, could we do something like this now?
Yeah, I think you're right. Everything's been done for binge watching.
Mm.
Everything's been done to translate I would say, very linear novel into the TV screen. So yeah, we need those moments of really it was ingenious, and you could see the David Lynch kind of hand into it. Do you remember the first 3D movie you've ever seen at the cinema?
Ooh, goodness me. I mean, I have been to see a few 3D movies, but they seem to sort of feel as if they were relatively recent, within the last 10 to 15 years. I certainly don't remember going to see a 3D movie when I was a kid or anything like that, because I would have remembered my mum and dad having to put the glasses on me or something like that. So I think I was well into the late 90s, early 2000s before I saw a 3D
Yeah.
movie. So I've definitely not seen either of these two that you mentioned.
No, I mean, for me, so my very first one was a rerun of The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Uh-huh.
which actually scared me so a lot. I was very young, and you're right, we wore those cardboard blue and red kind of glasses, very uncomfortable. Used to cut into your ears. And then years and years later was, of course, Jaws 3D. That's what I went to see at the cinema. But just very, very quickly, can you imagine being the producer of the Man in the Dark, and to make your life easier, you did a black and white 3D movie. And then within 2 days, someone releases a color version. I mean, that must just sting a bit.
No, I think that was definitely blindsided, wasn't it? Absolutely. There would have been a few heated words exchanged after that, I would have thought.
I would imagine so. Always a pleasure to go down memory lane with you, Roger Edwards, and to you, our audience as well. So let's get back into the present with our next segment, Marketing, Tech and Apps. So in this part of the show, Roger and I go on a quest for new apps, new technologies that can make life easier as a content creator and marketing professional. What have you found for us, Roger?
This week is a little bit of sort of a random selection. There's no real theme to it. I just came across a couple of apps which I quite like the look of, so I thought I would talk about them. Now, this sort of connects to what we were talking earlier about doing presentations and that sort of thing, but it also applies to videos that you might make as well for social media or for your own website. And one of the things that we do as human beings is that we add filler words into our content, or we do ums and ahs as we record stuff, and maybe even periods of silence as well. Now, if you are really quite into video editing, as I've become over the last few years, you'll be using something like Premiere Pro, Adobe Premiere Pro, to edit your videos, or I use DaVinci Resolve now, which is phenomenally powerful. And these programs have tools within them which will effectively use AI to identify ums and ahs and periods of silence, and the software can delete them. But if you're just a content creator who's out and about wanting to put together TikTok videos or short videos for LinkedIn or whatever it might be, you might not want to invest the money that you would need to buy Premiere Pro each month, or the lump sum you need to pay up front for DaVinci Resolve. And I came across this thing called Gling.ai, which is one of these websites where you basically can upload a video, and its AI will just go through it, remove all the filler words, ums and silences, and allow you to download effectively a pre-edited file. And it will add a bit of a sort of crossfade or a transition over the breaks to make it look nice and seamless. And if you don't want to invest the time and the effort into learning how to use a full editing program, I just think that is really quite cool. And yes, there is a price if you want to use it for more than, I think it's about 90 minutes. You get a month free. After that, you've got to pay. But 90 minutes might be enough for some people. If you're just doing TikTok videos that last 30 seconds, you can do quite a lot of TikTok videos over the period of 90 minutes, so in the period of months. So check it out, Gling.ai. I thought it was quite nifty. The second one is interesting because somebody asked me a question recently about CRM, and I've sort of been backing away from consultancy recently as I've been getting a bit older, and I've let a few clients go, and a few contracts have been coming to the end, and I haven't felt the need to replace them. And it just made me realize that actually CRM is something that I've just sort of got out of the habit of doing. Once upon a time, if I got a new connection on LinkedIn, I'd be typing their name into my database, etc., etc. And I don't tend to do that anymore. CRM systems, again, you'll have the complicated equivalents of Adobe Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve, I guess, ones with millions of options, and you need to invest quite a lot of time to understand how they work and to get the best out of them. Whereas some people, and maybe I fall into that category now, where you probably want to record your relationship with some people, but not everybody. I came across this one on the internet. It's called Folk, which again I thought was a fabulous, simple title. Folk. Oh, it's folk that you deal with, and it's almost as simple as just a spreadsheet. But it's lovely that you can just use it. Can link it to LinkedIn. You can link it to your socials like X or Threads or TikTok or whatever, and effectively it just gets your contacts and puts them into something that actually just resembles a spreadsheet. It looks quite simple, and there's some very simple functionality built into it to allow you to use it, to make sure that you get the best out of your database without having to learn all the technical stuff. So I thought that was quite a nice sort of introduction to CRM for people who don't know anything about it, or for somebody like me who's probably got to the stage where I don't need the more complicated version anymore. I think it's a nice halfway house. So folk.app.
I love the name. I think it's brilliant.
Yeah.
That's what it's so. Both of them I'll check. Thank you very much, Roger. So my selection, as ever, is informed by my work. So I think people are sometimes getting a bit confused that with AI. AI is not marketing. AI doesn't do marketing. You need to have a marketing skill set. You need to have a marketing strategy. You need to have a marketing kind of approach, and you may use AI to support in terms of some of the time-consuming activity. So it's a PR plus AI. It's social media plus AI. AI doesn't do social media. So I think we need to kind of get that really, really clearer in people's heads. But certainly, the one manifestation and the one thing that people will come across in terms of AI are the AI overviews on the search engine results. So more and more now, people go on Google, they go on Bing, sometimes they go directly into Gemini or ChatGPT, and they use it more as a search engine. So people are asking me, how do I get myself listed in the AI overviews? And I look at them sometime thinking, well, the same way you've had to do for the last 30 years to be on Google, have you taken care of your search engine optimization, or sometimes I call it the search engine experience? Have you done what you need to do on your website, but also are you featured on someone else's website as a guest contributor, so that using the unhelpful, but they are there where we are with the algorithm, you are selected. AI overviews behave the same way. They check you out, they look for co-citations, to use the proper term, and then if you are mentioned by others, it reassures the platform that they should mention you. So what have you done about this? And what I have noticed, Roger, people have moved away from SEO. I have some sympathy for that. And they seem to spend more time on social media, but those posts, everyone, are not listed on Google. I challenge you, everyone, to look at your recent work on Facebook, on TikTok, on X, on LinkedIn, and find it on the search. There are two different kind of channels. So if I were to start again, if I were people, I'm going to use a 1, 2, 3, Roger. Shall we do that?
Yes.
So job number one, can you please go on, let's say, Google, and Google yourselves, literally the business name. Do that right now, and literally take a screenshot of the page called All. Take a screenshot of the page called Images, News, Videos, and so on. Do that. Then go into what's called AI overviews, or whatever it's called nowadays, and find out your current position on your current listings and your current kind of profile under the AI overviews. And that creates your baseline. And the idea, Roger, with content marketing effort and PR and networking, those summaries, those kind of links and so on should improve with time. So do that. Number two, and this is where marketing tech and apps come in, I want people to reconnect with some old-fashioned tools, but they are so very powerful. So do you remember, we mentioned this before, a platform called Ahrefs, Webmaster Tools. So we used to use them all the time in the 2010s, and suddenly the spotlight moved almost like the eye of Sauron, moved away from SEO to social media. So essentially use the Webmaster Tools and do a massive kind of baseline audit of your current website performance look what's working, look if there's any issues as well, and more importantly, who's currently linking back to you. Do that kind of reference. And then number two, I would use the 𝗧𝗵𝗲, M-O-Z, I would use the 𝗧𝗵𝗲 domain authority checker to look at, if you're not right now ranking on page one of Google, but others are, it's probably because they have more backlinks than you from authoritative sources. Again, this is old-fashioned stuff. That's what we used to teach literally in the classroom in the 2000 and 2010. So go back to those essential techniques and find out, who in the future will have you as a guest contributor, as a columnist, as a guest on a webinar, on a podcast, and so on, and create, that goes citations. And then what I would do then for number three, I would do this on the 90-day kind of schedule. So book an hour a day. And for 90 days, you just do what I've just described. You have the time, and then you'll see very, very quickly how your kind of presence on the AI overviews will improve, because you're using well-established SEO techniques that are now, I would suggest to you, Roger, nearly 30 years old.
Yeah, SEO was once a great big black magic exercise, wasn't it? A black arts thing, and there was quite a lot of bad behavior going on. And of course, everything's now changing with the way AI works and all of that sort of thing. So I think you do need to go back and have a look. And we said earlier in the green room before we started recording, recently one of my theme for my website is just broken. It can't cope with the latest version of PHP. So as a temporary measure, I've had to revert my website back to a very old theme, which fortunately still does work with the latest version of PHP. But what I haven't done for a long time is checked my SEO and my Google rankings and AI rankings. Funnily enough, I do get at least 4 or 5 emails every day from people who tell me that my website isn't doing very well on Google and that they can help me for a fee. And I do tend to delete those emails as soon as they arrive. But yeah, SEO is important still, even though it's changed. So we have to go back and have another look.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a new search experience, but the basics always work, and they have worked for a very long time. So that should be reassuring for all of us that we can, apply those techniques. Super. So 4 new kind of platforms, 4 new tools that can really help you do more with the time given to you. Talking of time, it is now my pleasure to introduce our final segment, film marketing, just after this. Right, as we mentioned a moment ago, it was your turn to choose the movie for film marketing. You went for 𝗧𝗵𝗲 𝗡𝗵𝗲, released in 1992. Let's watch a trailer.
Hi, Mrs. Rossi. I'm here about the weekend job.
Come on in. They put him in a veteran's home, but he hated it.
Colonel's a gentleman.
A real hero.
This is some guy.
Down deep, the man is a lump of sugar.
Get in here, you idiot. What do you want?
I mean, what do I want?
What do you want here?
I want a job.
A job.
I promise you an easy $300.
I don't get an easy feeling.
How's your skin, son? I like my aides to be presentable.
Well, I've had a few zits. But my roommate, he let me his clinic because he's from Chestnut Hill and he's got
The History of My Skin by Charles Sims. Get out my dress blues. They're in a garment bag in the closet.
Are we going someplace, Colonel?
What business is that of yours? Don't shrug, you imbecile. I'm blind. Our destination is New York City.
I'm just gonna have to turn right around and come back.
Charlie's having a difficult weekend. How does he look like he's holding up?
Oh, he looks fine to me.
Don't think I can't see women, because I can't see women.
Boy, you have a one-track mind.
Women are the essence of life. She's wearing florists. Fleur de rocaille, Ogilvy Sisters soap.
That's amazing.
Well, I'm in the amazing business.
I should be getting back to school.
Ooh. I don't think you're gonna make it.
You said that the last shuttle leaves at 10 o'clock.
I lied. All I want is one last tour of the battlefield.
You're just in a slump right now.
How would you know, watching MTV all your life?
From Martin Brest, director of Midnight Run and Beverly Hills Cop.
Make your own rules, be your own board of governors, pay your own dues. I don't know whether they shoot you or adopt you.
It's not much of a choice, is it, sir?
Al Pacino. Chris O'Donnell. Scent of a Woman.
What a marvelous place.
Wow, that's really taking me back. You know, what a story, what a movie.
I know. Is this a feel-good film, Pascal? Would you describe it as a feel-good film?
Eventually, yes, but it goes into some rather dark territories, and we'll talk about this in a moment, but a very brave move as well to release this around the Christmas period.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it deals with the topic of suicide, but it's remembered, I guess, mainly for two scenes: the tango sequence where Al Pacino, who plays this retired lieutenant colonel Frank Slade, who's blind, and he does a very complicated tango dance in a bar restaurant in New York City with an actress called Gabrielle Anwar, and it's incredibly well choreographed, and you know, it's just such a memorable scene. And then of course there's also another sequence later on where the blind man Frank is driving a Ferrari through the streets of New York, and he's blind, and literally his companion is having to tell him when to turn left and right. And you know, it's at once exhilarating, but also you think, oh my God, if he turns at the wrong moment, he's going to go slap bang into a wall or into another car or something like that. So those are the feel-good sequences that I felt about it. But obviously, as we said earlier, it does have some very dark moments. What are your memories of this film?
So I went to the cinema to see Scent of a Woman, and I remember leaving the cinema thinking I may have seen one of the most exceptional performances of Al Pacino ever. But we mustn't forget that, you know, Chris O'Donnell plays a very, very important role. And with my kind of film production, film marketing hat on, this is almost the ultimate kind of apprentice, mentor kind of storyline that you have here, where, you know, a young, you know, kind of character, a young hero really goes into literally physically a dark cave to meet, you know, the grumpy sorcerer, and then together they go on an adventure and save each other. And I think what people remember as well, of course, is the big massive finale at the school during the hearing, where, you know, the character played by Chris O'Donnell, Charlie, is worried about being essentially expelled from the school because of the, you know, kind of bad behavior of other students. And we have also a great performance from Philip Seymour Hoffman, who plays essentially the very, very selfish students, who is responsible for, you know, Charlie being potentially expelled, you know, from the school. So there's almost 3-4 storylines going on at the same time. But for me, I was like, oh my God, that is why we love Al Pacino so much. And then you'll tell us a bit more about, you know, where that took him all the way to the Oscars.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. As I said right at the very start of the show today, I had just assumed that we had seen this film because Al Pacino is one of my favourite actors. I've seen pretty much everything that he's done. Some films like Sea of Love and Heat, I've watched multiple times. In fact, we watched Heat again just last weekend. Fabulous film. I did wonder when I saw Scent of a Woman, we have not watched this. This is the first time we're seeing it, and I just can't think back to what was happening in '92 that meant that we missed it, and we've never watched it since. I don't know why, but I loved it. I did wonder though whether Al Pacino's performance was just a little bit on the wrong side of over the top, or hammy, or chewing the scenery. I think the thing is, if you actually look at Al Pacino's career, he had an incredible run of successful movies in the 70s up until the early 80s, when he was doing films like Godfather and Serpico. But the performances he gave in those films were actually quite subdued and quite dark, weren't they? And he wasn't that physical. It was more brooding. Whereas I think *Scent of a Woman* was a sort of pivotal point for Al Pacino, in that obviously he won the Oscar for it, but every film he's done after that, his performance has been a lot more exuberant and a lot more hammy, maybe. You know, there's that great bit in Heat where he apparently ad-libbed that line about this woman having a great ass, and the person in front of him didn't know he was going to do it, and his reaction was absolutely horrified and was genuine because he didn't know he was going to do it. And you know, Devil's Advocate is a similar over the top sort of devil thing. And Any Given Sunday, you know, the film about American football, he was very loud and very exuberant in that. So I think that *Scent of a Woman*, for me, having now watched it and understood it, I think is that pivotal point for Al Pacino, where he went from the sort of brooding character actor to the more exuberant. And I actually think, in hindsight, whereas he might come across a bit hammy and some people might dislike that, I think that's when I started to like him more. And you could argue maybe *Sea of Love*, which was 1989, I think, a couple of years before this, was the start of that pivot. But this was the one that actually sort of baked it in, I think.
And for all, you know, if you think about the characters playing, but there's something about transformational about what he did, discovering almost like a new voice or a new way of expressing himself. And let me remind everyone that we have reviewed the marketing of *Sea of Love* on Two Geeks and a Marketing podcast as well. So for me, you know, it's top of the list. You know, if I want, so your question about the feel good, yes, if I want cheering up, I would watch, you know, *Scent of a Woman*. But that's what drama is about, and you have to go into some of the darker side of the human condition, as well as, you know, the adventure and the jeopardy of, you know, being in New York and having to be back on time for the school hearing, and to know whether or not Charlie will remain or will be expelled.
I think as well, I don't know whether you do this, or tell us in the comments whether this is something that you do as well. There aren't that many movies where you can actually just go and watch a scene from that movie completely in isolation and enjoy it. You know, if you have the spare 10 to 15 minutes and you just want to feel uplifted, you can go and watch the tango scene in *Scent of a Woman* without watching the rest of the movie. Now, watching that tango scene will probably make you want to watch the rest of the movie, but you could watch it on its own in isolation. And similarly, you could watch the Ferrari sequence and feel really quite upbeat and motivated. And there aren't that many movies, I think, where there are scenes in it that you think, I'm just going to actually go and watch that one particular scene because it is so good. You know, the courtroom sequence in *A Few Good Men* is one that I could, you know, the last bit where Tom Cruise gets the confession out of the colonel is just magical, and I can just watch that 10 minutes over and over again. You've got to take your hat off to Al Pacino, because obviously he's playing a blind man, so his eyes there's no blinking going on.
I know.
I mean, how on earth he managed that, and whether they had to do retakes if he actually accidentally blinked, who knows. But obviously he's a method actor, so he's always in character whilst they're filming, and he did a lot of research with blind people to get that, you know, that whole way of just being, and there's something slightly sort of unnerving about it, knowing that he isn't blind, but seeing how accurately, I think, he portrays a blind person. The fact that his eyes are often not looking at the person he's talking to or looking in the direction he's going, I just think he absolutely nailed that.
I know you've done the research on the market. I'm going to ask you to share, you know, some of your findings, but you mentioned *A Few Good Men*. Now that's interesting, because did you remember, or perhaps you did deep down, that actually *A Few Good Men* came out at the same time? So in the context of film marketing, I'm always curious about the competition, because, you know, a movie is never released in isolation. And I can only imagine, you know, the anguish and the kind of wrestling of when do we release this so that we at least get a fair share of someone's time and someone's wallet. So, A Few Good Men was released literally a few weeks prior to A Scent of a Woman, but also Disney's Aladdin. Can you imagine the competition? Home Alone 2, The Bodyguard with
Yeah.
Kevin Costner. Can you imagine Forever Young, Mel Gibson, and right at the same time, the same days or same weekend, you had Hoffa
Hmm.
and you had Chaplin with Robert Downey Jr. So it was a noisy, busy, as would be the case, of course, with Thanksgiving and Christmas. So not a safe bet. And what they did very cleverly, and I must confess, when I read your notes, I was thinking, was that wise to only release this movie in a small number of screens and then do for almost a re-release in January? But when you look at the competition, Roger, I think that was a very smart move because what they did do, as you discovered, was to use the small screen run, if you will, to create some great TV and radio adverts out of the reaction from the public.
Yeah, and it's interesting again, until I mentioned A Few Good Men there. Obviously, having not seen the film until recently, I hadn't realised that actually you can argue the climactic scene of both films is very similar, isn't it? It's almost like
Yeah.
A Few Good Men is a courtroom. Scent of a Woman is almost like a courtroom in a school where they're looking at Chris O'Donnell and deciding whether to expel him, and the climax of the film relies upon a speech by Tom Cruise in one example, and of course Al Pacino in the other. So the similarities were actually quite striking, despite the fact that that completely passed me by. Now, the marketing for this film, obviously over 30 years old, this film, it's quite hard to find much of the material that was used. But there is still quite a bit out there that you can find. What I thought was really fascinating about this was that the campaign was almost in two parts. Obviously, they were promoting the film, but there was a massive, massive sort of sub-campaign going on to make sure that Pacino won his first Oscar. Now, I think I'm right in saying that he'd had 7 previous Oscar nominations for films before this, but he'd never won. And the studio was really invested heavily into making sure that he won an Oscar for this film. So on the one hand, they're promoting the film to the public. Come and watch our film. It's great. It's got Al Pacino in. He's having a comeback after Sea of Love, blah, blah, blah. Isn't this fantastic? But they're also promoting themselves to the Academy, to the judges, I guess, to try and make sure that this film shows up. And in fairness, it's not just about Al Pacino getting an Oscar. They're also wanting Best Picture and Best Screenplay and all of that sort of thing, which they did win, Best Screenplay and Best Picture as well. So I thought that was fascinating that there was that two-pronged approach going on simultaneously with this film.
Do you know what's interesting is this practice will now be frowned upon. So it's also important to realize, there's a time for everything. So I think in the 90s, the courting of the juries, the panelists, if you like, was all right. Particularly, it was done by having their own specific trailers or their own kind of, I guess, would have been a press pack, but back in the days, probably sent by mail, that kind of things. But it's fascinating that how things move on because 34 years later, people don't do it as much because it's just not, the done thing, but yeah, very, very clever. And I think that playing to the idea of this is long overdue, which is a sentiment that everybody would share. You could challenge that necessarily. I think was a very, very smart move.
So looking at the actual collateral that I managed to discover, obviously the film posters, actually quite subdued, obviously using the name of Al Pacino, just Pacino, that's all it is. Pacino is the top on the top of the posters. The posters just show Chris O'Donnell and Al Pacino in one of them walking through Central Park in New York. I think it's quite a nice image. The one that I really like though is the second poster, which also has Pacino and Chris O'Donnell, but it also has a cutout of Al Pacino dancing with Gabrielle Anwar. And that is the poster that I think, for me, nails the film because you've got you can see Al Pacino's blind eyes, and that gives you an insight into his acting and the part that he's playing. But then you've got that snippet from what you could argue is one of the most iconic scenes from the movie. So that is the one that I like the best.
Yeah, and I think the first one, I mean, posters go through their own journey. Sometimes you do a teaser poster at the start of production, then, you have some different iterations. I mean, it's not as crazy as it is sometimes, movies today. They can have 7 different posters. It's hard to keep up. The IMAX version and all the others. I think the first one strikes me as more of the teaser poster time where it's quite busy. You've got the New York landscape in the background. They're trying to shove a lot of information. And I'm not convinced, actually, to say from the director of Beverly Hills Cop is kind of right, but I can see, I can understand why at the time. Let's put a package together and let's get people excited. But the second one you've shared and researched is it for me. I mean, if I was to buy, because I used to have it on VHS that long ago, that movie, if I was to buy the Blu-ray, I'm hoping there would be that version on the cover.
Yeah, so we've watched the trailer, good trailer, but I think you had a few insights about the trailer.
Well, you could argue long trailer, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. I mean, thank you everyone for watching it and listening to it with ourselves. And it's been a while, but I've done a bit of a trailer breakdown for you, Roger. I just think that, those who edit trailers are typically not the people who edit the film, because it's a different skill set. And I think you need a bit of distance from the details to be able to tell the story well. And it's almost perfectly segmented into 30-second little mini stories. So the first 30 seconds introduce you to the character played by Chris O'Donnell. There's almost no dialogue, but there's no dialogue actually, just images and soundscape of him essentially looking for a job. We understand that. The next 30 seconds is Charlie hearing about, the character played by Al Pacino from others. And we're thinking, my goodness, who's this man? He's going to meet the boogeyman of sort. And in fact, very, very cleverly, the first meeting ended up in this dark room, the dark cave, again, using the symbolics of the apprentice and the sorcerer. Next 30 seconds after that is setting up the relationship and the trip to New York, so the call to adventure, if you will. And then next 30 seconds after that is the two things, the tango, the scent of women. The title is introduced for the first time in there as well, but then the jeopardy of, I've got to go back to school, and he says, I'm not sure you're going to make it. And he sets, the whole relationship then on that trajectory. And then the remaining kind of 40 seconds is a montage where there is an allusion, to the suicide. There's an allusion to this idea of, as he puts it, I want one last tour of the battlefield and everything that comes with it. But it doesn't reveal too much. You've got to be watching it as well. And I just love to see the artistry of the trailer making, and I just think it was brilliant. Almost perfectly 30-second mini stories all the way through.
And I actually managed to find some of the TV spots that were produced for this film, all of which are on YouTube. Now, they are incredibly bad quality. I think most of them are in 240p, which is, about as low as you can get in terms of resolution. But there is one TV spot which I really quite like, which was an audience reaction, where they actually just had people leaving the theatre having watched the film for the first time, some of which are in tears, some of which are really in high spirits. And it's almost like an example of social proof before we even knew social proof existed.
Yeah.
And there are also, and I know you're a big fan of lobby cards, but there were some pretty lovely lobby cards for this film. The only surviving examples I managed to find were actually on a German website. So Der Düfte der Fräulein is the name of the film in German. But those lobby cards are absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah, and people are thinking, what is he talking about? No, I confess, I collect lobby cards, everyone. So please be in touch. It doesn't matter almost the movie, but I'm always on the hunt for lobby cards, because they were the Instagrams of the days. And my memory of going to the movies, when going to the movies was very enjoyable, was, the queuing up. So do you remember back in the days, you and I would not have booked online. You would turn up and kind of hope for the best in terms of the time you arrive, the movie is about to start, that you fancy, or you'll stick around a bit longer. And then you would queue up in this corridor of dreams, as I call it, and you would look at the lobby cards, either to get excited by the movie you're about to watch, or think, oh, I fancy that for next week or the week after. So lobby cards were very, very important.
Indeed. And I'll tell you what as well, I also saw reference to a PR electronic press kit for this film. Now, of course, as you said earlier, we were sort of in the earlier days of the internet, earlier days of electronics. So electronic press kits at the time were a big thing, weren't they? You know, and it's interesting that I did try to find the actual press kits themselves, because once I'd heard of their existence, I thought, well, there must be some out there. So the electronic press kit for Scent of a Woman included a featurette called Amazing Business, which was a behind-the-scenes look at how they did the rehearsal for the tango scene. And I actually asked Google Gemini to do a deep research to see if it could find the clip for this, and Google Gemini did come back to me with a URL for a YouTube video, and I thought, oh, this is just amazing. And unfortunately, when I clicked the URL, it was dead. So maybe this Amazing Business featurette just doesn't exist anywhere out there anymore. But I would love to have seen the rehearsal shots of that scene. It is out there somewhere.
This is film marketing history there, because you're right. So 1992, can you imagine? That would have been the early days of emails. I don't even know what kind of word processing programs people use in 1992, but you can just imagine to sheer nostalgia to see someone getting an email with maybe an attachment or links to. I mean, in the 90s, if you watched a video online, it would have been tiny, the size of a first-class stamp, if people can remember what they are, on platform like Yahoo or GeoCities, So this is brilliant. Well done, Roger. That's exciting.
Yeah. So overall, I think whilst I went into this thinking, I don't think I'm going to be able to find much, there is a remarkable story out there. And I think that the fact that it was a simultaneous campaign to sell the movie to the public, but also sell the movie to the judges of the Oscars and the Golden Globes and whatever else. And the film did incredibly well at both the Oscars and the Golden Globes, that I think, as a two-pronged marketing campaign, I think this one was pretty impressive.
Thank you so much, Roger, for the research, and really for taking me back onto that kind of journey of remembering being at the movies in 92, then watching regularly on VHS. And yes, I think there's going to be another item in the Amazon basket if the Blu-ray version exists. Thank you so much for all of you for listening to this new version of our audio and video magazine. Please subscribe and leave comments and suggestions in the usual places. Until the next time, go out there and make sure your marketing is done right. Here was Roger Edwards, and I was Pascal Fintoni. Bye for now.